Now, just for reference, that's the original guard. You can see I wanted a lot more meat to work with. This just wasn't gonna be what I wanted it to be. This has enough material to now turn it into what I wanted it to be. The first thing I'm gonna do is take it to the grinder, and you could see how a little bit of material cheeked up on the edges. I'm gonna grind that smooth and get it down to solid material. I'll grind these tips off back to solid material and just clean everything up. What that's gonna do is it's gonna show me how much usable material that I have, and then I can make a design within that usable material and go from there. Now let's smack the crap out of the other side. Let's see, I want to grab it like this. You're really not supposed to miss the metal like that and hit your anvil, but it does happen. Alright, so we're done with the cross peen now. Let's go ahead and switch to a standard hammer. And we're going to start cleaning this up. I want to say one thing. Forging is not easy, and it's not swinging the hammer that makes it difficult. It's trying to figure out how the metal is moving. So check this out. Look at that. Can you see how my hole is starting to drift? Let's see if I can't pull this in close without burning my camera. You can see All right, guys, here's where we're at. After tons of grinding, marking out, shaping, grinding, marking out, shaping, grinding, marking out, this is where we're at. And I just want to show you. This is what I had, and this is what I have now. There's a huge difference there, isn't there? I just couldn't get what I wanted out of that first piece or the second piece. That's why I ended up going this route. Now, I made sure that this is flat under here because I'm going to have a fitting for the handle that will mate up to this flat surface right here. So this is perfectly flat right here, at least as wide as the knife handle is going to be, and then it slowly gradually goes into this curve that goes up the guard. And then I have these wings, and then it comes into a point right here. So the blade has to nestle in the middle. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to mark the width of the blade, how far it comes out, and I'll put this in the milling machine, and I'll mill my slot over just wide enough so the blade can sit down in it. Because right now, the edges of my slot for the tang are higher. See, it stops right there. Well, the blade's going to sit, the edge of the blade, let me show you. So there's the guard. There we go. The problem is, this has got to come all the way down in there. Right now, it sits right about there, and you can see a gap on both sides. So what I need to do is I need to mill the slot so that this can go blook and set all the way down into it. Then what I'm going to do to make sure everything's symmetrical, I'm going to measure these tips, and I'm going to choose the smallest one, and I will draw it on a piece of paper. I'll just sketch around it. I'll figure out which one of these tips is smaller, and then I'll just trace around it on a piece of paper, cut it out, lay the piece of paper over here, and scribe around it, and cut this side to match exactly perfectly of the other side. They look pretty much the same. This side's a little bigger, and there's a little bit of different shape on the edges, and I want them to match perfectly. So like I said, I've got the distance from here to here correct. I've got, this thing is like full of different contours. So let me tell you all the different contours. We've got this inside radius right here. That's on both sides. Then we've got a different radius on the bottom. Then we've got another radius on these outside. And then when you flip it this way, it's flat right here, but then it's got a radius right here that comes all the way out to the ears. So there's 4 of these radiuses, 2 of these radiuses, 2 of these radiuses, and 2 of these radiuses. And everything needed to match. This was very difficult. This is the 4th one that I made to get to where I'm happy with this. And I am happy with this. It's going to work out really nice. It's going to look cool. And it looks pretty fantastic on the knife already. Now, I am going to do some cool things to touch this up for color-wise also. So stick around. All right, so let's go ahead and refine this tang slot here. Now, you can see in here there's some shoulders. Ouch. We want to work those shoulders out of there. Do that side. I'm going to flip it around because it's easier to work from this side than this side, so I'll just flip this around here. I use a lot of different files for this kind of work. This file is a Warding Bastard file by Nicholson. And the cool thing is it's got really sharp teeth on the edge. Normally I don't like files that have sharp teeth on the edge, but in this case, it works really well. So I use a lot of different files for these. This is a Warding Bastard file by Nicholson. And what makes it unique is that it's got a really sharp edge all the way down, which you normally don't want, but I actually use that edge to cut in the shoulders on these. So that edge works really to my advantage here. I really like this stage in the game where things start coming together. We got the guard fitted on. It's nice and neat. It's not finished yet, but it's pretty close. It's fitted, it's where we want it, it's the shape that we want it, and it's symmetrical, so that's good. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this big chunk of metal here and we're going to make the pommel. I forged a pommel first, but it wasn't the size and shape that I wanted it, so I just bought a chunk of steel here, $4. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a round hole all the way through it, and then I'm going to mill a slot about this deep in it, and then I'll convert the tang to a round peg. That way the round peg will go all the way through, but then this portion of the tang will enter the slot, and that'll stop this from being able to rotate, and then I can thread this and put a nut on the bottom, and it'll hold everything real nice and tight, and this won't turn. The reason I don't want this to turn at all is because this is not going to be round. This is going to be shaped kind of flat, profiled like this. It's going to flare out, so I don't want it to shift either direction. So I'll mark out a center line, and then I'll mill a slot and drill a hole. That's what we're going to do. Okay, here we are. Knife, dagger, tang. The tang comes all the way down. The pommel will come all the way up to here. We milled a slot in the pommel that'll receive this first section of the tang. That keeps it from rotating. And then we're going to have a post stick out through the bottom of the pommel. Now, I need to remove this piece of material on both sides to create this post. So here we are. We've got the guard, we've got our spacer here, and then we've got the pommel. The pommel is roughly this shape, so I've got this kind of marked out right there so you can see it. Now generally I would just grind this off, but I've really been enjoying milling on my milling machine, so I'm going to chalk this up in the mill, and I'm going to mill off most of this extra material before I go over to the grinder. Now whenever I'm doing a three-dimensional object, so this is going to have a lot of different contours and shapes. Whenever I'm doing an object like this, I like to do the profile first while I still have a flat edge to index everything off of. So I do the profile to make sure that everything is straight and exactly how I want it. Once I get this profile cut, then you'll see we'll come back on this angle and we'll cut the outer profile, and I'll show you how I'm going to line up from the guard through the handle into the pommel and get everything to match up the way that I want it to. So let's go ahead and mill off this excess material here. Well, this is as far as I took it on the mill. You can see I milled steps. I could have flipped this on its side and ran the edge of the milling cutter to cut out these steps, but I removed most of the material with a mill, and now I'm going to step over to my 2x72 grinder and remove the rest of this. Let me crank this up. It's kind of hard to get the light right with the white background, but we got this shaped to the profile. Now we haven't started the third dimension shaping process, but we got the profile done. So that's going to go there. The next thing that I'm going to do is shape the spacer. So this guy right here, this is important because the whole rest of the handle is going to lay out on this shape here. Now, right now it's a rectangle, and I've got the outside edge shaped to the correct width, and I've got these edges shaped to the correct width. So this fits in the dimensions, but I don't want it to be square. So look here. Now, if this was square, then that would mean you'd have a square handle or squared off edges. I don't want the squared off edges. What I'm going to do is I took this, let me show you. I took this, you could see my lines there, and I gave it a slight radius like that, just like that. So now what I'll do is I'll grind off the excess. There, you can see those lines there now. Yeah, see this line here? So I scribed a line on both sides, and I'm just going to shave off a little here and a little here, and that's going to give some shape to this. That's what I'm looking for. That's the next thing I'm going to do. And ultimately, after this is shaped, the side of the handle will index off of the side of this spacer. And also, that's how thick this will be here where it meets down at the bottom. Right now it's a lot thicker. But that's where that third dimension comes in. Because what's going to happen is it's going to go from here and flare out. We're going to have it flare out and taper down this way. So there's 4 or 5 other things that have to happen to this. This is still really heavy, which we do want it to be heavy because it's got to balance this out. You know, this is real blade heavy right now. So once we put this on here, you know, that's the idea, is that it helps balance the knife out with that weight on the end. All right, so we've got our spacer right here, and what I want to do is I want to put a nice decorative groove in my spacer. So I've marked out a line. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a groove right on that line with my Dremel tool, and that'll give me a good starting place to move in with my file. It'll hold my file in the right place. So here we go. Just turn this. Whoops. Try not to drop it too many times here. Oh, that's good. Okay, now I'm going to come in here with my round needle file. Here we go. Perfect. Rotate this bad boy. We are back at the workbench, and here's where we're at right now. We've got our dagger pretty much built up. We've got all the fittings cut to size. We've got the guard done. We've got this shaped. We've got it fluted. We've got the pommel in place. The next thing we're going to do is present the handle material. And what we have here is some amazing fossilized mammoth tusk. This is awesome. Now, I've built this entire dagger with this in mind. I thought about this from the very beginning, and this is what inspired the dagger, actually. So let's go ahead and talk about how I'm going to implement this. I want this, the eye, to be right in the center of the handle, because I plan on the handle swelling slightly, like this right here. I want the handle to swell out. So I want that eye to be right in the middle of the swell. Unfortunately, that's going to cut off a little tiny piece of this down here, which happens to be the most colorful piece of the tusk right here. This right here kind of has some blue and some browns in it. And I really wanted to keep this, but I think it's more important aesthetically to have this center eye right in the middle of the swell of the handle. So what I'm going to do is when I cut this off, I'm actually going to save this piece as a spacer material for another knife in the future. So I'll still utilize that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up and down. I'm going to mark out where I want it, and then I'll do some cutoffs of the piece that I want to keep, and then I'll drill the center out so it can slide on. Once I get it fitted onto the tang, once I hollow out a section in here so it'll slide onto the tang, then what I'll be able to do is draw around the fitting top and bottom and give myself some grind to lines, and then we can shape the contour, the actual perimeter of the handle first, and then we'll go in and do the three-dimensional sculpting. Because not only is it going to flare out this way, but it's going to flare out to the side also, so it gives you a nice grip that you can grip onto, but it'll also not be a round grip. It'll be slightly elongated from side to side, so it'll index in your hand, and when you pick it up with your eyes closed, you'll know exactly how the knife is oriented in your hand. And that is something that's very important to me. I don't really like daggers that have perfectly round handles, and that's exactly why, because you don't really know where the edge of your dagger is with a round handle if you pick it up with your eyes closed or if it's in the dark. Other than just referencing the guard material, but this way, there's no doubt in your mind. When you pick it up, you know exactly where the cutting edge is. So let's go ahead and get this going. We've got the fossilized woolly mammoth tusk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it out. I'm going to cut off the extra material because I'm going to save that, and then we're going to bore some holes in it. So when you're working with something this precious, something like a 10,000-year-old woolly mammoth tusk, you definitely want to measure once, measure twice, make sure it's right before you start drilling your holes. Set it all up. Drill your hole, go slow, remove all the swarf as you go, and there you go. That's kind of the steps to success. All right, here we are. Just like I told you in the last video, I drilled my holes and fit this to the tang. Now, the next thing that I did, while I still had a flat surface, I cut the profile of my handle. That's the handle shape that I'm going for. I'm going to leave it a little bit bigger than my fittings so that I can do a museum fitment. And so what I do is I just take a pen and I draw around my fitting. Okay, now that's my grind to line. Basically, now I have a line right here that I can grind down to that's going to be slightly larger than my fitting. And then after I get everything exactly shaped the way that I want it, I'll radius all these edges and put it together. So let me go ahead and dome this because I need to create the shape here. It's going to get bigger in the middle, like right where you hold it in your palm. So it's going to go from the fitting here and the fitting here and get to the biggest in the middle. So it'll swell to this thickness in the middle and then shrink back down to the fittings. And it'll also have a dome or a kind of a domed taper in this direction. So there's a lot going on in this piece, and basically it's 3D sculpting at this point. These are the indexed lines that I can do off of a flat, so I've got those dialed in. The rest of it I'm going to lay out with some layout lines, some grind to lines, and freehand it on the grinder. You don't need to be a part of this. Here we go. Raw.